Sharpen your knives, everybody, because we're taking them out for this review of Knives Out by Rian Johnson. Thank you. I did a little bit of a pun there, just a little bit. The latest Rian Johnson whodunit, as it's being advertised. It hit the festival circuits starting a couple months ago. It's been building a little bit of buzz. It's hitting theaters everywhere next week, just in time for Thanksgiving. It's for a story about family members and murder. So for some people, it's perfect timing. It is, I think, for many people, the exact right timing. This is a Thanksgiving movie at its finest because it's family drama, family riffs, and yes, murder and mayhem and a mystery. An old-timey kind of sleuth played by Daniel Craig, who is chewing the scenery with everything in him. He's playing an old Southern, I want to hear your take on this. I was curious. Okay. I was curious because Daniel Craig is playing a Southern detective, and boy, he is just chewing it up, which is interesting because this is such an incredible cast. However, you have everyone in this cast. It's like Don Johnson, Lakeith Stanfield is in this cast. Daniel Craig, you've got, this is Chris Evans. Jamie Lee Curtis. Christopher Plummer. Yeah. So Michael Shannon. But what's interesting is that it's led by really Ana de Armas, who you might remember from Blade Runner 2049. But she's incredible in this movie. I think her performance is extraordinary, and it really does carry the movie. But she's very, very grounded, and then is surrounded almost pointedly by some very larger-than-life characters and performances. Definitely. You're right. This is a very talented cast. Daniel Craig stands out, definitely. And I'll say this straight up. I think he deserves an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor. I think he's amazing in this movie. But I think some people are going to think you're either going to love it or hate it, I think, what he's doing, because he is playing a cartoon character. Yes. Essentially. And you're right. You have some very grounded, sobering things in this film. And then you have these cartoonish moments. It's her. Yeah, it relates back to her. And she really does keep the story grounded. Yeah. But it's okay that it flies high for me from time to time. This is ultimately... she's the same. It's so I know that he did this intentionally, meaning Rian Johnson, because she's this fulcrum, and she's the only sane person in a very insane world, which I don't think he's doing pointedly to reflect how it feels to be alive right now. But it is interesting because it throws it into sharp relief. The circumstances that you find her in, she's taken on this ride. That is totally out of her control. And setting the stage for this, I was doing some reading on the film, and because of the climate being what it is, and because media outlets feel like they have to drive clicks and stuff, I've seen that profiles are being written of this movie that puts it squarely in the world of politics, saying like, this is a murder mystery for the Trump era or whatever. Yeah. And I really think that that's a disservice, because that's not what I hadn't read that. I've seen a few different stories for that, and I don't think that's necessarily what this movie. That's not what it's aiming to be. I know why. Because this is the story of a family, and much like any other family, when they get together, they argue. And one thing, and you see one such scene that they argue about, is politics. So you have some members of the family that are very. They don't drop the president's name, but they're obviously talking about the current political climate. They're arguing. They're debating about it, and so I think a lot of people in their profile in this movie are putting this into like, this is supposed to be a but no, it's really, to me, supposed to be a reflection of, these are awful people. This entire family, except for this one character, they're just nightmare people. Yeah. And to the degree that politics are brought in, to me, it was much more of an indictment on, here are two people from quote unquote opposing ideologies, one of which they both think that they're so much better than the other one, but when push comes to shove, when the knives come out, it doesn't matter, because they're all alike. They're all the same. They're all greedy, nasty, uncaring people, and that's the whole driving point of the movie. So, if you're reading about the movie, not even from a political ideology thing, but you're like, I don't want to do a politics thing. This is so much more a murder mystery. It has some very funny moments. Yes, there are characters in it
who are political, but I did not read this as a political movie overtly in the sense of like, this is a commentary on today's political era, you know?
If there is a commentary in there, I don't think Rian Johnson does anything with one purpose. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't think he constructs a movie in order to make a point about politics. And there have been movies that have been constructed around that, or to make a point about culture, society. I think he's presenting a version of the world, and it probably has a lot to say about a lot of different things. There's layers to his movies. That's why he's such a good filmmaker. Yeah. And I should say for the record that I'm a huge Rian Johnson fan. That said, I love it when he gets to do his work. When he in Brick, Brothers Bloom, and Looper, he tackles these genres and he does his spin on it. But the point with all of those movies is that it is entirely centered on character, on humanity, on growth. And it's not about the twists or turns of that particular genre. They're mostly irrelevant, and everything is really in service of the character. So two things from that. I would agree with you. If there is some reflection about today's world, it's that hypocrisy is
knows no
ideology.
Yeah.
That whether you are, quote, left-leaning or right-leaning, when you are using a human being, which happens in this scene, using a human being to illustrate your point, you've lost the plot. Mm-hmm. A human being is a human being. They're not to be used to illustrate your point. And so if there is a reflection, is that it's everyone's an asshole. Really,
That's true.
You know, like, which is true. But more than that, it is, this family is so toxic. Mm-hmm. And this family is so broken because they've been so spoiled. Mm-hmm. And the patriarch of this family has inadvertently, I don't think he meant to do this, set them up to be the worst versions of themselves. Yeah. And then is given this light in this, maybe, in a character. The only other thing that I would say, too, in terms of Rian Johnson is that I think probably people worry about twists in movies like this. I wouldn't overly worry about it because it doesn't really matter. That's not the point.
Yeah, and it's a mystery. It's a murder mystery, and of course there are going to be twists and turns. I love a mystery, and I pay attention, but I don't try to think 7 steps ahead and try to unravel what's going on.
Oh, I was definitely doing that.
I try to. My mind wanders, but I'm not sitting there like puzzling over every little bit. I will say that when I got to the end of it, what I liked about it was we got to the end, and I didn't feel like there was a cheat anywhere. Yeah. I actually felt like it had all been very cleverly set up through throwaway lines, things that you may not even think are that important, or that you think are maybe just part of the mise en scene, mise en scène, the setting, to establish things. But it actually turns out this is an important thing that gets paid back later on. I actually think that's very cleverly constructed. And I will say, I really admire Rian Johnson's talent as a filmmaker. I think he's an immensely talented filmmaker. The films of his that I have seen, I have actually felt Brick, Looper, Last Jedi were all films that were very well.
You didn't see The Brothers Bloom?
I didn't see The Brothers Bloom. I have not. But those films, I've always really admired the craft of them. But I thought, honestly, that each one of them was too clever by half for me. That there was always a little extra added on that just took me out of it because it seemed unnecessary. It seemed like a flourish that maybe didn't fit that thing. This, to me, didn't feel like that. This was easily, for me, my favorite of Rian Johnson's films that I've been able to see. I think that he really shows a great mind for how to construct an engaging mystery. A really fun mystery. There's a lot of fun in this movie. And these characters are so well written. They're not all just one variation on rich family member, their interactions with each other, the fact that there's this hidden history that gets unveiled. You've got Michael Shannon, who's playing this kind of sullen, very inward person. You have Jamie Lee Curtis, who's kind of outward and above it all. There's a different interaction between the in-laws versus the people that are actually born into the family. Christopher Plummer is great as the sort of specter that is over this entire film. You see some of his character in real time. You see some of it in flashback as we figure out what's going on. And then, Daniel Craig sort of coming in as this cartoonish character, but in the best way, in the sense that eventually things are so ridiculous that he's the only sane person in this crazy nut house.
No, it's definitely her.
Well, but I just mean of of the family. Not she is the center of the movie, but I mean, of these crazy people, Daniel Craig is now the only one with any grounding whatsoever.
And I think it's really interesting because at its core, this is a movie that's celebrating kindness, which is a really tough thing to sell and not come off as saccharine and, overly sweet. But it is one of those aspects of that if a human being is just good-natured, I think that is so rare. I think it's so valuable and special. Someone that's sweet is so undervalued and so rare. I know almost no one that's like legitimately just sweet. And the people that you do know that fit that, not that people aren't nice, they're nice, but they're just layered. There's more complexity to it typically, And I think there's more barriers. I think one of the interesting things that this movie shows with one character in particular, who's a young woman in college, who you can tell really has good intentions, and she wants to like be a good person, but she's has all of these barriers that are preventing her from being the kind of person that she really wants to be. And that's one of the things that we're talking about with politics. And she represents this version of politics and the side of left-leaning politics. And she's not really able to fulfill that because she's too self-interested. And then there's this character in the middle of it that just is like trying to live her life in any given moment and be kind. And that is, I think, a very rare thing to demonstrate in film, the just pure value of that, and still be really entertaining, and still really smart, and still be really funny. This is a really well-written movie. I think it's a really well-directed movie. What I like about Rian Johnson is that he does deconstruct films and genres as he's making them. In Star Wars, people had many opinions about it. We have an hour where we talk about our mixed feelings about that.
Yes, we do. And many other more episodes of SJU in between where we then and now.
Yes, but with this movie, I don't think he's deconstructing the crime movie caper to the point that anything else is sacrificed.
Yeah, it's not a subversion of expectations on what a murder mystery can be. It's just a really cleverly constructed murder mystery that has dead ends and false leads because that's what a good mystery is, and it really suits his talents, I think, as a filmmaker and as a writer. Chris Evans, by the way, a character who is referred to a lot in the first half of the movie, seen much more in the second half of the movie. I was thinking about this as I was driving home from the movie, which is that it's been so interesting to see this award season, particularly the Avengers that perhaps have a little more free time. Chris Evans in this movie, Scarlett Johansson in Jojo Rabbit, Mark Ruffalo in Dark Waters, and Marriage Story. Just their pursuits of these films that are sort of coming out post Avengers that is showing that in their different ways. I think I sense, particularly with Chris Evans and Scarlett Johansson and Jojo Rabbit, I'm seeing Marriage Story later this week, there's a vibrance. There's an energy there that I don't want to project anything, but it almost feels like not that they resented their roles, but they are now in these projects. It's freeing, and you can feel the energy. I honestly think that Scarlett Johansson's performance in Jojo Rabbit may be the best performance, or definitely one of the best performances of her career, and one of my favorite performances this year. But Chris Evans really brings a jolt, a shot in the arm. I
think he had fun with this one.
I think he had a lot of fun with it, and I think everyone did.
I think everyone did too. I mean, the fact that you have just Jamie Lee Curtis back in action and back in films, and she's great in this movie as well. Again, I think the interesting thing here is that everyone's given this free reign to dive into these very meaty characters, very fun to play. But they are the wild cards and the insane people that surround. And I would agree that Daniel Craig's character is sane too, in that he,
in his own way, that he recognizes what is of true value in the world. Because what the movie is actually about is what we value and why we value that, and how we reward that or don't. He has a monologue in this film as he's unraveling the true nature of the case that is one of my favorite acting performances of the year. And he says that, and just the way it's written and the way he performs bombs
say
it.
A thing so bad.
I know, right? But you'll know it when you
You'll
see
know
it.
when you see it.
It's just hilarious, and it's a big recommendation for me. I really had a good time with this movie. If you like murder mysteries, this cast is, there's not a whole lot of complaints. I think you can have a really good time with it. Big thumbs up from me.
Huge thumbs up.
No
from
copyright
me.
infringement intended.
Yeah.
Sorry. To the estates of Siskel and Ebert.
Yes.
Yes, please.
We liked the movie. Yeah, I think this is one of my favorites of the year. Knives Out.
It's up there, but man, let me tell you, this year there are so many movies that have come out recently and are coming out that are so good. It is going to be really, really hard for me to go, and then going back to things like Us that came out earlier this year. It's going to be so hard for me to break down my favorite movies of the year. But this will be this is in the mix.
Yeah.
This is in the mix. So yeah, big recommendation for Knives Out. You can check it out next week.
And there's an Easter egg for the next Star Wars. I'm messing with you.
Or is there? We don't know.
We don't know. You'll have to stay till the end of the movie.
Thanks for watching our review of Knives Out. Stay tuned here on Fandom Entertainment. We'll be bringing you reviews for the indies and the big movies and everything in between hitting theaters as we get into the award season, as we get into the Thanksgiving holiday, the Christmas holiday, the New Year, you name it. We'll be here telling you what we think. Till next time, thanks for watching.